You know what stopped me in my tracks a few years back? I was driving through Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, right through the heart of Amish country, and I passed farm after farm with these gorgeous, lush vegetable gardens. No yellowed leaves, no chewed up stems, no signs of pest damage anywhere, and not a single bottle of pesticide in sight. Meanwhile, back home, I had been battling aphids, cabbage worms, and Japanese beetles for the better part of 3 decades, spending money on sprays and still losing half my tomatoes by August. These families were growing cleaner, healthier crops than I had ever managed, and they were doing it without any of the chemical tools I thought were essential. That really shook me. Today, I am going to walk you through exactly what the Amish do differently when it comes to pest control, step by step, so you can apply it in your own garden. And stick around to the end because I will share a clever old technique they use that most gardening books never mention. It might be the simplest thing you add to your garden this year. I will be honest with you. For most of my gardening life, I treated bug problems the way most of us were taught. You see pests, you spray. You see more pests, you spray harder. And it worked, sort of. But it was a constant cycle. Every season felt like a war. I was barely winning. When I started learning how traditional Amish families approach their gardens, it was not some dramatic overnight revelation. It was more like someone turning on a light in a room I had been fumbling around in for years. What they showed me was not about throwing out everything I knew. It was about filling in the gaps with a perspective that has been working quietly for generations. In Amish communities, particularly in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and Holmes County, Ohio, there is a guiding principle called Gelassenheit. Gelassenheit. It is a deep concept, but at its core, it means yielding to natural order, letting things work, the way they were designed to work instead of forcing your own will onto every situation. Now, this is a life philosophy for them, not a gardening term, but when you watch how it shapes the way they tend their land, the connection becomes obvious. They do not look at a garden and see a battlefield where bugs need to be destroyed. They see a living system that, when set up properly, keeps itself in balance. And here's the part that matters for you and me. The science completely backs this up. Modern integrated pest management research confirms that healthy ecosystems with diverse plantings, strong soil biology, and beneficial insect populations naturally suppress pest outbreaks. What the Amish figured out through generations of hands-on observation, university extension programs are now teaching as best practice. They just got there first. Let me show you how it actually works in the dirt. This first step is where the whole Amish approach starts, and it is probably the most important thing I will share with you today. Before they ever think about what pests might show up, they focus on building healthy, living soil. Here's why that matters. A plant growing in poor, depleted soil is like a person running on no sleep. It is stressed, it is weak, and it becomes a target. Insects are remarkably good at detecting stressed plants. Research out of several agricultural universities has shown that plants grown in nutrient-poor or chemically treated soil actually emit different volatile compounds, signals that attract pest insects. Healthy soil produces healthy plants, and healthy plants are far less attractive to pests. The Amish build their soil the old-fashioned way. Aged manure from their livestock, homemade compost, leaf mold, and cover crops turned back into the beds. No synthetic fertilizers, no quick chemical fixes. Here is exactly what you can do. Every spring, about 4 to 6 weeks before your last frost date, spread 2 to 3 inches of well-aged compost across your garden beds and work it into the top 6 inches of soil. If you do not have livestock manure, bagged compost from a local garden center works just fine. The goal is dark, crumbly soil that holds moisture but drains well. When you grab a handful and squeeze it, it should hold together loosely and smell earthy, not sour. If you have been relying on synthetic fertilizers, I am not telling you to quit cold turkey, but start layering in compost alongside what you are already doing. Over 1 to 2 seasons, you will notice your soil comes alive. You will see earthworms, you will see fungal threads, and you will start to see fewer pest problems. That is not a coincidence. That is biology doing what it does when you give it the right conditions. The second thing the Amish do that most backyard gardeners skip is consistent crop rotation. And I mean truly consistent, not just casually moving the tomatoes to a different spot when you remember. Here is what happens when you plant the same crop family in the same bed year after year. The pests that feed on that family build up in the soil. Their eggs overwinter right there, waiting. When you plant tomatoes in the same spot for the third season in a row, you are basically setting a table for every tomato hornworm and flea beetle in the neighborhood. Amish families rotate on a 3 to 4 year cycle, and they rotate by plant family, not just by individual crop. So your tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant are all in the nightshade family. They go in one bed this year and do not come back to that bed for at least 3 years. Your squash, cucumbers, and melons are all cucurbits. Same rule. Beans and peas are legumes. Same rule. Here's a simple way to set this up. Divide your garden into 3 or 4 sections. Assign each section a plant family group. Each year, every group shifts one section over. You do not need a complicated chart. Just take a photo of your layout each spring and rotate the next year. What this does is break the pest life cycle. Those overwintering eggs hatch and find nothing to eat. The population crashes naturally without you lifting a finger or spraying a drop of anything. Now, I will be straight with you. Rotation alone will not eliminate every pest, but it removes one of the biggest advantages pests have, which is predictability. And when you combine it with what comes next, you start to see why Amish gardens look the way they do. This is where the Amish approach really starts to feel different from conventional gardening, and it is probably the part that changed my thinking the most. Instead of planting vegetables in neat, separated rows with bare soil between them, Amish gardeners interplant herbs and flowers right among their vegetables, not as decoration, as pest defense. Basil planted every 12 to 18 inches between your tomato plants does not just smell wonderful. It actively repels aphids, whiteflies, and tomato hornworm moths. The volatile oils in the leaves create a scent barrier that confuses pest insects trying to locate their target crop by smell. Dill and fennel scattered through your garden attract parasitic wasps, tiny beneficial insects that lay their eggs inside caterpillars and aphids, eliminating them without any effort from you. Marigolds planted along the borders of your beds release compounds through their roots that suppress harmful nematodes in the soil. And nasturtiums serve double duty. Their bright flowers attract pollinators, and their peppery scent repels squash bugs, cucumber beetles, and whiteflies. Here's the key. This is not about tossing a few random flowers around and hoping for the best. You want to be intentional about placement. Plant your herbs in clusters of 3 to 5 plants spaced throughout the bed, not just along the edges. You want the scent coverage to overlap across the entire growing area. I started doing this about 4 years ago, and the difference was noticeable within the first season. My tomato plants had visibly less aphid damage, and I actually saw parasitic wasps working my garden for the first time. It was one of those moments where you think, where was this information 20 years ago? If you are finding value in how the Amish approach pest control differently, take a second to subscribe. I have been learning a lot from traditional growing communities, and there is much more to share. Now, let us keep going. This next step builds directly on the interplanting we just covered, and it is something the Amish understand intuitively that took me way too long to figure out. You do not just want to repel bad bugs. You want to actively invite the good ones in. Ladybugs, lacewings, ground beetles, parasitic wasps, hoverflies. These are your garden's security team, and they work for free. But here's the thing. They will not show up if there's nothing for them to eat, drink, or shelter in. Most conventional gardens are too clean, too bare, and too simple to support a healthy population of beneficial insects. The Amish solve this by planting what I think of as habitat borders. Along the edges of their garden plots, you will often see strips of yarrow, sweet alyssum, clover, fennel, and other flowering plants that most of us would consider weeds or filler. These are not afterthoughts, they are infrastructure. Yarrow and sweet alyssum produce tiny flowers that are perfectly sized for parasitic wasps and hoverflies to feed on. Clover fixes nitrogen in the soil while providing nectar for pollinators. Fennel attracts ladybugs and lacewings, both of which devour aphids by the hundreds. Here's how to set this up. Dedicate a strip about 2 to 3 feet wide along at least 2 sides of your garden. Plant a mix of these flowering species and let them do their thing. Do not keep this area tidy. Let it get a little wild. That wildness is exactly what beneficial insects need for shelter and egg laying. You should start to notice an increase in beneficial insect activity within the first season, but the real payoff comes in year 2 and beyond, as those populations establish and begin to reproduce right there in your garden. I want to be straight with you. You will still see some pest insects. That is actually what you want, because the beneficial insects need something to eat. The goal is not zero pests. The goal is balance, and that is exactly what Gelassenheit looks like in practice. Now, there is one more habit the Amish practice that ties this whole system together, and it is the one that requires the least equipment but the most discipline. They walk their gardens every single day. Not to harvest, not to water, just to observe. They are looking at the undersides of leaves. They are noticing which plants look stressed. They are checking for the first signs of egg clusters or feeding damage. And when they find a problem, their first response is not to reach for a spray bottle. They pick, by hand, cabbage worms get plucked off and cabbage worms, dropped into a jar of soapy water. Squash bug eggs, those little bronze clusters on the underside of leaves, get scraped off with a thumbnail before they ever hatch. Tomato hornworms get removed the moment they are spotted. I know that sounds tedious compared to just spraying everything down, and I will admit I resisted this for a long time. But here is what I learned. When you catch pest problems early, within the first day or two, they almost never become serious outbreaks. The Amish are not spending hours doing this. A 10 to 15 minute walk through the garden each morning is all it takes. And here's the part that surprised me. Once I started doing this consistently, I actually enjoyed it. It became the most peaceful part of my day. You begin to notice things you never saw before, the way a ladybug larva moves along a stem eating aphids, the tiny parasitic wasp hovering near your dill. Your garden stops being a problem to solve and starts being a system to observe. That shift in perspective is what Gelassenheit is really about. Let me share some patterns I noticed in my own gardening and how the Amish approach handles things differently. I did most of these myself for years, so there is no judgment here, just some observations that might help. The first pattern is reactive spraying. Most of us were taught to wait until we see pest damage and then treat it with a product. The Amish approach is to build conditions that prevent the outbreak from happening in the first place. The spray becomes a last resort instead of a first response. The second pattern is bare soil between rows. Conventional gardens often keep the ground clear and exposed. The Amish fill those gaps with companion plants, cover crops, or mulch. Bare soil is wasted real estate that could be working for you. The third pattern is monoculture planting. Growing a whole section of just one crop gives pests exactly what they want, a concentrated food source that is easy to find. Interplanting breaks up that target and confuses pest insects navigating by scent and sight. The fourth pattern is killing everything that moves. When you spray broadly, you wipe out beneficial insects along with the pests. The Amish approach of hand-picking targets only the problem insects and leaves the security team intact. I sprayed my garden with a broad insecticide one summer and watched my ladybug population vanish overnight. It took 2 full seasons for them to recover. That was the last time I did it. Now, here is something I picked up from an Amish neighbor in Ohio that most gardening books do not mention, and it is one of the simplest, cleverest pest strategies I have ever seen. It is called trap cropping. The idea is this: you plant a small sacrificial crop of something that pest insects find irresistible, and you plant it about 10 to 15 feet away from your main garden. For example, if you struggle with flea beetles on your eggplant, plant a few radishes or Chinese mustard greens in a separate spot before you even transplant your eggplant. The flea beetles swarm the trap crop instead of your main plants. Once the trap crop is loaded with pests, you pull it up and dispose of it. You have just removed a huge chunk of your pest population without spraying a single leaf of your actual garden. I started doing this 3 seasons ago with blue Hubbard squash to pull cucumber beetles and squash bugs away from my zucchini, and the difference was remarkable. My main crop had noticeably less damage, and the trap plants absorbed the hit. It seems almost too simple, but when you understand that pests locate their food by scent and visual cues, giving them a louder signal somewhere else makes perfect sense. Plant your trap crop about 2 to 3 weeks before your main crop goes in, so it is already established and attracting pests before your good plants are even in the ground. That is what I have learned from the Amish approach to keeping bugs out of the garden. It is not one, magic trick. It is a system. Healthy soil, consistent rotation, intentional interplanting, beneficial insect habitat, daily observation, and a willingness to work with nature instead of against it. If any of this changed how you think about pest control in your own garden, I would love to hear about it in the comments. Hit subscribe if you want more of these deep dives into how traditional growers get such incredible results. Thanks for spending some time with me today, and I will see you in the next one.